Hello and welcome to the Behind Closed Doors podcast. My name is Alicia Aberley and I'm so grateful that you have joined us in this space. Behind Closed Doors is all about the types of conversations that we only usually have with our best friend, our partner, our counselor, our coach. And sometimes it's the conversations that we don't actually have with anybody else at all. The women that are interviewed in this space are all women that are making a difference to the planet. They're women that are inspiring and empowering. The intention is that you too will feel inspired and empowered by these conversations. So grab a cup of your favorite drink, pop your feet up, and enjoy this episode of Behind Closed Doors.
Today's guest is a human optimizer, speaker, performer, conscious filmmaker, and host of the Deep Dive podcast. He has been featured on top podcasts, in the Huffington Post, and also Elephant Journal. His powerful spoken word poetry has been shared all over the world, and his one-man show, Permission to Think Freely, toured internationally at the end of 2017, with more dates planned for this year. Hello and welcome, Adam Rower.
Thank you so much for having me, Alicia.
We've just been having a chat beforehand, and I'm just jumping out of my skin to have this conversation with you. So thank you so much for joining us in this space.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to dive deep into wherever we're going to go.
Yeah, so our topics are, and we can go anywhere past these, our topics of choice so far are creativity, plant medicine, and DNA activation.
Yeah, I'm down for all of those. They're a huge part of my life, every single one.
And I had a special request. So recently I saw that you had created the poem, You Are Who You've Been Looking For. And it brings tears to my eyes. And I would love if we could open with that.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I didn't know we were going to open with it. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'd like to. Thank you.
So I always preface this and let people know, like, if you're listening to this, that this transmission came through for me when I was really starting to understand that the more deeply I loved myself, the more deeply I was able to love others. Because when we can see our own quote unquote imperfections, our own flaws, and learn to love them, then when those get reflected back to us in any way by people around us, we can love them so much more because we see ourselves in them. We see that reflection and we love that reflection. So that was the basis for writing this piece of poetry. And it's called You Are Who You've Been Looking For. You are who you've been looking for. So stop looking for more unless you're looking in a mirror, because it's about time for you to see clearly that you are who you've been looking for. And that empty feeling you got, that hole in your chest, you only got that feeling because you think you're not blessed with everything you need. You see, we live in a consumerist society, which means they need you to buy stuff. And the easiest way to sell it is to tell you you're not enough. Buy this car, you'll get girls. Buy this bra, you'll get guys. And we're seeing it so much that we start believing these lies. But the truth is, the makeup they're selling to make you feel prettier is the same makeup you buy to stop feeling shittier about this lie they keep telling you that you are not enough. And what about the movies we watch, all the shows on TV? The more I watch, the more I see I need you to complete me. And yes, love is the answer. Love is the key. But if you can't love yourself, how can you ever love me? And loving yourself, what does that even mean? Like massages and selfies and that sort of thing? Because the more I think about it, the more it feels weird. I've always been taught that self-love was something to be feared. I've been taught that arrogance is bad and vanity, it's not good. And even my bracelets are telling me to act how Jesus would. So what should I do? How should I act? I'm supposed to love myself, but how do I even do that? Well, I got a trick that I picked up from a friend who noticed that I was quick to defend her when she would say something negative about herself. She would say, I'm so dumb. And I'd say, you're so brilliant. She'd say, I'm so weak. And I'd say, you're so resilient. And when she said, I feel ugly, and I said, you look beautiful, she asked me why I was so dutifully filling up her cup constantly and yet treating my own cup so irresponsibly. Because when I looked in the mirror, my voice was quite clear. You're ugly, you're too thin, your hairline's receding, and you got a pimple on your chin. And that was when she gave me a piece of advice that changed my life. She gave me a hug. And she said, treat yourself like someone you love. Treat yourself like someone you love. And now I'd been standing, but I needed to be sitting because I couldn't believe that I had been letting myself keep forgetting that I was who I'd been looking for. And deep in my core, I knew it was time to stop looking for more until I could look through all my fear and look into a mirror and see clearly that the man looking back at me was the only one who can make me happy, and I am already enough. And I'm not any more special or unique than you. That's why I'm here to speak to you. You are already enough. And when you start to see that, you will start to be that. Your world will get brighter, your load will get lighter, and you can see that with life, you can be a lover, not a fighter. And that life, you deserve it because you are worth it. And there's no point in letting yourself keep forgetting, because no matter what you say or do, you are perfect. And so today, I hope I leave you with a direction correction away from the flaws you see in your reflection. They aren't flaws to me. They are simply protection against all the doubts you have of your perfection. So start today. Take a good long look in the mirror and say, I am who I've been looking for.
Goosebumps. Thank you. What a beautiful way to open, which leads so nicely into creativity. How does this flow for you, Adam?
Yeah, how does it flow for me? I actually have gotten pretty clear on my creative process. It's something that I've done as a group coaching program and am currently turning into a video course, because I think that for me, the creative process is about aligning ourselves, becoming the vessel to receive the frequency of the idea. It's not about generating something inside of ourselves. It's not about like creating this formula that's happening alchemically in our bodies. It's about understanding that in the ether, there is an infinite amount of ideas. They're all out there, just like all the radio stations are all around you at all times. And so our role in this is really just like you would tune a radio to pick up the station you want to receive. It's about tuning ourselves and our vibration to the frequency of the idea that's meant for us to channel through. And so that process of creativity for me is, I use an analogy. I use a garden hose analogy for this. And imagine that you, Alicia, are a garden hose, right? And basically we think about, okay, if we believe that creative ideas and creative energy are meant to flow through us like water, it's like, okay, I'm a hose. Perfect. Well, the first thing you do when you're getting a hose out to water a seed of an idea is pull it out of the shed and untangle it, right? Because sometimes it's all, knotted and like tangled and nothing's going to come through. So you got to untangle. And that is a process of really removing and unblocking all our limitations, the limiting beliefs, all the just crap that's in the way of our fullest potential. And then the second stage of that is once you've got it all straight and ready to go, it's about hooking it up to the tap, right? Actually hooking it up to the water source, which is the equivalent of learning how to actually tune in to those frequencies. And then the third step is, well, how do we really turn up that water? How do we make that a huge flow as opposed to a little drizzle? And that is looking at, okay, how do we optimize and cultivate and become the container for more water to actually flow through? And a lot of that is our daily practices, the food we eat, stuff like that. And then the fourth and final step is once that water is flowing, it's what do you have on the end of the hose? Like, how does that creative energy go out into the world? And, some people have those little gun nozzles and they spray. Some people just use their fingers. Some people have a sprinkler, whatever it is. I heard someone tell me once they saw a hippo that you could screw onto the end. So my point is that even though it's the frequency of an idea that's coming through this hose, at the end of the day, it's still going to enter into the world through your unique expression. And so, that's my 4-step process. I call unlocking your inner artist, where I take people through that process of creativity. And that's how I create everything, is really recognizing that it's about my internal state aligning with the frequency of what wants to be birthed.
So what have you done in your space to allow yourself to be a clear channel, to be able to receive this way?
Wow. I mean, it's an ongoing process. I feel like the more that I continue to clear, I think that human beings, we're like corks in water. So meaning that we don't have to try to be infinite. We don't have to try to be incredible and unique and powerful. Like, that's our natural state. Like a cork in water, we just have over time started to take on all these things that tether us down and weigh us down. And so through the cutting of those cords and releasing of those limitations, we will rise naturally. Like, that is our natural state of being. And so for me, that's looked like years and years and like tons of money put into personal development, and hiring a life coach and working with more coaches and mentors. Like I remember my first life coach, how scary that decision was, because I didn't have the money, so I would have to put it on a credit card. It wasn't in my bank account. And that leap of faith of saying, yeah, I believe that I can control, like I can change my life. I can become the creator of my reality rather than the victim of my circumstances. And that is I don't know, like that leap of faith from that moment on just like spiraled into even, was it yesterday? What day is today? Where I am, it's Friday. So yeah, yesterday I was in a somatic sexual healing session, my 6th of a total of 7, and super intense, very vulnerable. Imagine being like naked on a table. Like it's an intense thing. And it's a deep level of repatterning and reprogramming and releasing, because so much of our limitations also reside in our sexual energy and our lower chakra and our fears that we took on at a really, really young age. And so plant medicines, coaching, workshops, I'm reading like 3 books at once all the time. And like all of that stuff, I feel like contributes to the whole. And so when you ask the question, like, how do I become as much of a pure channel, pure vessel as possible for whatever wants to come through me? Well, it's by recognizing that the frequency of the idea is pure. And what I want to put out into the world, I want as undiluted as possible. Like my role in the creative process is to have as little of my own fears, doubts, and limitations dilute the frequency of the original idea as possible. And so how do you become a pure channel, a pure vessel for the frequency to come in, go through your unique code and out into the world and have a tangible product or poem or whatever, and still maintain the integrity of its original download? And so I think the way we do that is just get all of those fears, doubts, and limitations, as much of them as possible, out of our system. And so, yeah, it's been years and years and lots of different modalities.
And that brings me to the point that I wanted to make there in that space, and why I asked you that, because so many of us watch other people and feel like, oh, they're at this level and they're doing this and they have these amazing things happening and they're creating all of these amazing things. Yet we don't see what people have been through. And I know for myself, my journey's been, almost similar to yours. I had a life coach. That was where I started. I have 5 books on the go, literally 5 books. I always was a 1-book person, had to finish it from cover to cover. Now it's constant in the cleaning up, the clearing out, the coming back to purity, the tapping into those parts that are really uncomfortable to go into, until it just becomes a way of being, that there's no other way. And I feel like I just want to make that, just want to put that out there to the audience, that it's always a process. And our journeys, like you said, Adam, it's taken you years to get to where you've got to today. Me too. And I don't think there's ever a number on that for how fast that happens for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's taken my whole life to get to where I've gotten to today, right? And the same for you and everyone else. I think that it's it's an important distinction to make that our bodies are our unconscious mind. And so another way of thinking about that is when you think of like muscle memory, right? And riding a bike, and people, oh, it's like riding a bike. You get back on because you just remember from when you were younger or whatever, or swimming or whatever it is. It's when you've practiced it enough, it goes from a conscious, like, how do I ride this bike? How do I balance, down into the body so that it becomes muscle memory. It lives in the cells of our being where we don't have to consciously think about it. And we react faster than our conscious mind can even process it. And so that's the same with all of this work. It's the same with creativity and embodiment of these principles, that if people are listening to this right now, and when you're listening to this, then obviously you're on a particular path. You're a searcher, you're a seeker, you're committed to being the best version of yourself. And so that process moves, it starts in the conscious mind, where you're making the decision to go to that workshop and hire that coach, and you're making the decision to read those books. And after enough time in that, some of those concepts, the ones that you started with and you've been practicing and putting into your life, well, those things become embodied. They go from the conscious mind into the unconscious. And now like for me, I have no idea what I'm going to say next. I have no idea what your next question is going to be. And I'm okay with that. I love that, because I'm literally in this moment right now, I'm trusting that I embody enough of my work that I can provide value to the people listening. And that's the whole reason why I even started my podcast, The Deep Dive. I started that podcast because I realized that it's not even like what you're thinking, it's how you're thinking. It's a way of being. And I wanted to just share with people, like, what does that process look like? What does it look like? Day in, day out? What does someone could look at my quote unquote success, or my business, or my videos, or whatever it is, and say, oh wow, like that seems so far away. And you listen to my podcast and you'll realize, just like last week, I was struggling. I was going through an emotional time. And I think it's just important to be authentic and open about all of that, and recognize that it's a process with no end. There's no finish line to any of this.
Take the pressure off.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
There's only pressure if you think you're supposed to be somewhere else, or you're trying to get somewhere that you're currently not.
That's when we realize that I feel like we can literally, like, the weight's lifted off and we can just breathe. It's that patience element. We're not taught the patience element, are we? Or just understanding that everything is as it's meant to be, and we will move as we are meant to move. So living in that moment, I guess, classic, the power of now, just being in that moment allows us that space to enjoy more.
Yeah, well, we're dancing all the time between intention and surrender, right? Like, I'm the creator of my reality, but I'm co-creating with the universe, and my higher self, which exists beyond time. So therefore, like, my timeline in this life is so limited by what I can consciously comprehend with a brain that's limited within this reality here. And so, setting the navigation, inputting that GPS, and then surrendering to the flow of a move of the journey.
Yeah, that is a dance. Absolutely. That's been something I've been working on this year, and feel like I'm in a beautiful space with that. Just surrender, let go. But it's time, right? Again, same thing, practice and conscious awareness.
Totally. Yeah, it's just practice.
So how have you used the plant medicine in your journey to open you up more in your space?
Wow. How haven't I? That's a really great question, because, plant medicine for me has been probably the biggest teacher for me in my journey overall. My spiritual awakening actually happened in an ayahuasca ceremony, because I went into that ayahuasca ceremony just like not knowing even really what it was. I was just so desperate because I was going through like the worst time of my life. And my friend said this was really powerful and helped. And I had been a fan of psychedelics in general, entheogens, and like mushrooms. Like I had tried mushrooms for the first time, I think when I was like 20 years old or something like that. And while most of my friends kind of, like we used to take mushrooms and just have fun. We used to just like play and like watch crazy movies. And like, that's what we used to do with it. It was never a spiritual experience. And yet the first time I took mushrooms, I looked down at a pillow and looked at all the threads in the pillow. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a thread in this pillow. And I was like, and if I remove one thread, the threads over on the other side, they don't even know that that thread was removed. They have no idea. And that was me going, if I die right now, so most of the world has no idea outside of like people in my neighborhood. And I was like, oh my gosh, that scared me. Like that was the first moment where I said, I want to be the thread where if you removed it, all the other threads would know. Like it was me saying, I want to make a global impact. And I attribute that in many ways to that mushroom experience, which was my first one and was still part of just like having fun and not having any spiritual beliefs at all. And so I've had a healthy relationship with plant medicine, I feel like, for a long time. And ayahuasca specifically became the like awakening moment for me and has continued to be such, grandmother. She is a teacher. She is loving and firm and just knows exactly what you need, but never in the way you think you need it. And so, it's been a huge part of my journey. And it's why Asri and I, my partner, beloved, who's been on this show, it's why we're launching a group program. We're launching Ancient Future, which is a 3-month group program where we're actually going to tap into the quantum field through plant medicines on behalf of our group. So we are going to have ceremony each month, Asri and I, and take plant medicine and bring the intentions and questions of the group into the ceremony and be basically conduits, be vessels for whatever wants to come through for those people through us. And that's how much, to give you an idea, like that's how much I believe in the power of plant medicine, that I'm actually now utilizing it as an ally to serve others directly.
It's really interesting how it's illegal in Australia. So
it's illegal basically everywhere.
Oh, is it? Okay. I thought it was the way that you talk about it for this in the States. I'm like, oh yeah, that's just something you can do, like having a drink of water.
Oh no, definitely not. It's highly, highly illegal to use most psychedelics, if not all psychedelics. I don't know that any of them are legal. But what's interesting is seeing how how it's all shifting, like the mindset around it is shifting so much, because for the first time since Nixon was president, they have the government funding and government approval to do studies on MDMA. And they're doing studies in Europe on LSD, where they're actually just having people take LSD and go into brain scans so they can see what's happening when you're on LSD. And the amazing thing is, for people who are curious, you're seeing, when you're in the control group, you go in and you are shown images and they read how your brain scans. And then you take the LSD and you're shown the images and they read how your brain scans. And those same images, your brain lights up in a completely different way, which means that you can see the exact same scenarios in your life. You can have the exact same experiences from an objective standpoint, and yet your brain will perceive what's happening at a completely different way. And so for people who are stuck in like the same loops, the people who keep finding themselves in a depression, the people who keep finding themselves in unhealthy relationships, et cetera, well, and self-sabotage, you're continually looking at those circumstances from the same lens. And yes, you can hire a life coach, which will give you a different lens. And yes, you can hire, or you can read books and listen to podcasts, and that'll give you some different awareness as well. And in the moment, there's very little I've found as powerful as a plant medicine to just like bring a different level of awareness and almost immediate embodiment. Like there's a really intense like shift that can happen in a moment where, for using myself as an example, not believing in energies and connectedness and all of the higher powers and higher self, I didn't believe in any of it. And from one night to the next, I was like, yep, okay, I get it now.
I had an experience recently with ayahuasca, and I had 2 ceremonies, one night after the other. And for me, it was my intention I set for that was to tap into source, higher, tap in deeper. And whilst it was quite subtle for me, the impact, and even now, like I still feel her, and that was, you know, a couple of months back, or a month or so ago, and I can still feel sometimes like, oh, there you are.
Was that your first time?
It was my first time. Yeah.
And it was only a few months ago.
Yeah, about a month ago.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
A month. Yeah. Last month in November.
And you did that in Australia?
Well, I'm really apprehensive to talk about it here because we're not, you know, it's like so taboo. And
I think, I think you'd be surprised. I mean, in like, for example, it's illegal in the United States, and yet there's probably on any given night, there's thousands of them happening across the country, like everywhere. And I think that the question people should ask themselves, because my parents fall into the category of like, well, what those are illegal. It's illegal. And then I look at like, well, is legality for me the thing that I'm using to determine what's in my best interest? Like how many things are illegal or are legal or illegal that I don't align with? And then I started looking into the history of when they became illegal in the United States specifically, and all of that. And I realized, you know, it's become a political thing. It's really become a political thing more than anything. And so that's why I speak so openly about it, by the way, is because I think that there's the power that plant medicine has to shift and potentially save this human race. I see it as plant allies. Like when we say plant medicine, what do we like? People think of like, oh yeah, ayahuasca or maybe iboga or San Pedro or peyote or some of these. But what about your broccoli? Like what about the people who take maca powder in the morning, or matcha or coffee? Like when you eat you know, a piece of chocolate and get that sugar and the cacao, like your endorphin release, like that's a chemical reaction in response to a plant that you're eating. So at what point do we draw the line and say, this is plant medicine, this is not plant medicine, this is just food? Like, I don't know. And that's an interesting conversation to be in for sure.
Yeah, I think for myself, I have total peace in the space. For me, I didn't even know it was illegal in Australia until someone said to me, you don't talk about that. And then when I found out about it, when I was going to have my journey, all these people from all over the place are telling me that they're having weekend retreats as well. I'm like, wow, it's like an underground world. And once you hear about it and dive into it, then you see everybody else as well. Mine's more out of the respect for the people that I was involved with, because that, you know, that was a private space for them. So I'm more than happy to share my journey and the experience. And I feel like for me, what's actually happened in my space, and I haven't shared this publicly yet, I'm not sure if if it wasn't my intention to share it publicly, but I'm happy to go there in this space. So I actually realized, so November for me, this will be, when we play this will be in January, but November for me was deep dive into dancing eros. So understanding the 5 archetypes, 5 female archetypes. I know there's plenty, but we did 5. Wild woman, slut, maiden, priestess, and erotic mother. So tapping into those elements of ourselves. We were away for 8 days and just peeling back, diving deep. And I thought I'd done deep work, and this was just, here we go again. And then a week later, I went and did an ayahuasca ceremony. I'm like, oh, okay. I knew the month was going to be huge. And it was. And it took me a little while to integrate in that space. And what's come out of that for me, I had a clear intention is that now I'm able to channel mediumship style. So I had a spirit come through my body, and was having trouble transferring over to where they needed to go. And I had another medium guiding that person through me, and they were able to transition to where they needed to go. And then I had another experience where so my body's showing me when spirits want to come through to me through nausea. So really interesting how it's happening. I never expected this to happen. It's just what's opened up. And I've helped someone I know and love, and whose mother-in-law and mother had passed away, and she come through very clear and very loud, and shared some things. So that's opened up for me. And I feel like what happened with the Aya ceremony, I also had rape, and I think how do you pronounce it?
Almost like an H.
Hape. Far out. I don't think I ever touched that again in my life. But what that did, I was out. I was white for about.
So for people who don't know, hape is a blend of tobacco and other herbs that's used like a snuff, where they blow it into your nostrils.
And so that was in between my two ceremonies. So I had ceremony one night, did that hape ceremony the next day, and then did another Aya. When I did the hape, I was rocked. That was it. I was so sick. But what I found was my body for months, years, a year or two, had been getting tingles and wanting to go off to another dimension. That's the best way I can explain it. And I'd never allowed myself the space to go in and see what was happening like in that space. I'd feel it. I'd be like, oh, a message is trying to come through. And then I just wasn't ready to receive. And so when I did that experience, everything I felt that experience that I'd been feeling opened up like on steroids. It was humongous. Yeah. And it took me to a whole other place. And then a couple of weeks back, when this all started happening for me and tapping into this space deeper, I was out with a girl. I'd only had lunch with her. We weren't even having lunch, just got up with her twice. We're at a cafe, and all of a sudden it happened. And it was on like full steroids. It's really, really loud where we were. And I'm like, okay. And I said to her, look, I just got to go for a minute. You just got to give me a sec. I got to get your message. And I shut my eyes. Everything else disappeared around me. And I was able to tap into a message very loud and clear for her. And I feel like the ayahuasca has really opened me up to be able to be that clear channel.
Yeah. I feel like the way that I describe it is that everything is, a bandwidth. Right? There's like these frequency bandwidths. And so what we can perceive, so for people listening, think about like even what you're hearing right now, the decibel levels and the sound waves are within a bandwidth that your tools, your hearing, your ears are able to perceive. And yet there are sounds all around you right now that you're not hearing. The same as, like the light, right? There's things that we can see within a particular bandwidth of frequency, and anything outside of that, like X-rays, we can't see with the naked eye, right? Well, if you recognize that everything exists as frequency and as a bandwidth, then really what we're talking about is when you take something like an ayahuasca or some other entheogen, you are actually expanding your bandwidth, like that LSD study I was telling you about, where your brain just works differently. You're actually receiving, you're turning on the receptor sites in your body and in your brain where you and your consciousness to receive the information that's around you all the time, but your transmitters are just not on. Your receptor sites are just not on. And you can tap into different frequencies. And so what's great is once you've been able to tap into them, you know that you can, like your body, it exists as memory in your body. And so like you're talking about, you can be a month later and go back into a space that you may not have been able to access even before the ayahuasca, because it existed in a different frequency bandwidth. It existed outside of just what you were capable of receiving. And so I think that it's like upgrading your system. Like upgrading the sensitivity of the radio. It's just, I see it as being wildly important and incredibly valuable, because so much of what's happening in the world right now is the struggles that we see and the just like the pillaging of this planet that's happening for resources is happening because people are existing within a frequency, a bandwidth of greed and scarcity and fear. And so when we talk about things like free energy and the idea that we can have energy sources, like imagine you had your own energy source that never needed charging and it just could tap in to free energy and power your whole house and your car. We wouldn't need any more fossil fuels. And I believe that those technologies exist. We have plenty of evidence. When you watch like a documentary like Thrive or whatever, and you see evidence that those technologies exist. Well, the thing is that until we shift the frequency of human beings, of the collective, into one that is outside of greed and fear and scarcity, that those technologies will never be a part of our actual experience. Because even the idea of free energy for everyone can't exist when the collective is primarily operating within a frequency of fear and greed. Like they just aren't compatible. And so I value people like yourself who are willing to just go and explore and see what other frequencies, what else is out there. And when you receive it, now it's a matter of integrating it into your life. And so, yeah, the biggest concern that I get from people is they're like, well, isn't it illegal? Isn't it like it's the danger? You can do all the research on it. The legality, that you can do all the research on that as well. And I just encourage people to do it and start asking questions and ask yourself why you might be more okay taking your like ashwagandha tincture or your, you know what I mean? Your like multivitamin, as opposed to drinking a cup of ayahuasca or some naturally grown psilocybin mushrooms.
I would absolutely do it again. 100%, 100%. I just, I found the experience incredible and soul changing. That's soul changing. And absolutely what you're saying now, because I went in, my soul guided me there. I knew nothing about what was going to happen. It had started early this year, early 2017 for me. And, it was just someone mentioned that they were going to Costa Rica. And I was like, yes, I'm there. I want to go. And it didn't align for me. And then it come up again. And I'm like, yes, I'm there. And it didn't align. And then turns out through beautiful synchronicity that I was able to do it. So the soul had called it in for a long time. And when you're speaking now, I'm able to understand more about that and the frequency, because definitely my vibration has shifted in itself. And I can feel that. And I'm so much more connected to the earth. And I feel that frequency. My respect levels for Mother Nature have just gone through the roof. So, yeah, pretty incredible space. Mushrooms. Yeah. Oh, sorry, you go.
One thing I want to say, because I think it's also important, is you don't need plant medicine to do any of this, by the way. So like, it is not a necessity. It's not required. Through lots of meditation, through a lot of tuning into frequencies of nature, to deep somatic work, like breath work. What we're talking about is an altered state. And there's plenty of ways that you can find altered states that aren't plant medicine. So if plant medicine's not calling to you, great, awesome. But I encourage you to find whatever it is that does help you access these frequencies that exist beyond what you are normally operating within.
Yeah, be a bit in the background anyway. Yeah, I find that something that I'd love to share there as well, and it was a misconception that I had based off hearing other people speak about it. Bless you.
Thank you.
It was a misconception I had, is that you would not be in your own awareness. So I think that was something that was interesting for me to recognize, was that I was still present. It was the experience that was going on for me and with me that was different, yet I was still here, able to know what was going on and not at the same time, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Oh, it totally, it's pretty rare for someone to be completely it's not a disassociative. So yes. It's rare for someone to go and be like, I have no idea what happened. I was completely gone. Like, you're very aware. I mean, it's happened. You're a participant in the experience for sure.
Yeah. Very beautiful. I feel like I want to come to the States and hang out with you guys for a bit. When Azriel was speaking about it, I was like, yeah, sounds amazing what you're doing. And I like the idea of what you're doing with your 3-month program and channeling other people So they won't be with you. You'll just be the vessel to receive for everybody else.
I mean, we're gonna invite people to be a part of meditation at the times and for the hours that we will. But it's just going to be the two of us because we have this relationship with plant medicine. And like you said, there's a lot of people who either don't know how to get it, aren't ready, are scared, or just don't feel the call, like whatever it is. And there's so much information available there. So if you had a question about something going on in some really deep way, and just you've been pondering it, it's like, well, great. Like we'll go up and we'll ask and we'll see what comes through, and we'll get messages specifically for you. And then more importantly, or just as importantly, because it is the group coaching program in the container for 3 months, also have calls helping to integrate and helping to apply. Because one of the biggest things that I've seen is people who do start going to like ayahuasca ceremonies or whatever, they have this awareness that now gets bestowed upon them. And yet awareness is not change. Awareness gives us choice to change. And so the support to say, okay, well, I just learned this and this and this, and I understand how to become a medium and like open up to these things. Great. Well, now how does that get applied to your life? How do you actually move into more of the joy and abundance and fun and adventure that you want for your life? How do you make that happen with the information that's now available to you? And that's a big part of it that I see is missing for a lot of people. And that's a role that in indigenous cultures, you know, the shaman and the village were involved in that. So when someone would sit in medicine with the shaman, you had the shaman and you had the village who it was a part of the entire culture to support the integration process. And what we're seeing now is people going to a ceremony of whatever kind on the weekend, and then they're like back to work on Monday, surrounded by all the same people and the same vibrations and frequency, and like being like, what do I do with all of that? And so I think it's a critical and very important part of the process is the integration.
And I can see exactly how. I just have not wanted to do anything else. I've just been fully integrating, and everything has shifted around me. So to have that support, I can see how valuable that would be to absolutely know, because I have no idea right now what my space looks like. Before November, it was one way, and now it's like, no, it's not that way anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Amazing.
I value that you guys are creating that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So DNA activation. Let's go there.
Yeah. DNA activate. You want to say something? You want me to say something?
You go. I don't know about DNA activation. Go for it.
Okay. Well, DNA activation is the concept basically about what used to be called junk DNA, right? So science used to call 97% of our DNA junk DNA. And basically what that meant is they didn't know how to measure or understand what it did. And they just said, it doesn't seem to be doing anything. It's kind of just dormant DNA that's there. And that concept is pretty ridiculous when you just look at nature and realize that nature is not 97% inefficient at anything. And so more realistically, what resonates with me is this idea that actually we're just not using the majority of our DNA that's available to us. So when someone, and everything in the esoteric space, everything we talk about, frequencies and vibrations and all of that, there's a way that it translates into this physical reality. And everything we experience will still translate through the body, which is why when you have a spiritual experience on a plant medicine like ayahuasca, you're having DMT flood your system. And the DMT is, it's still like, that's the physical way, that's the physical path that your body walks to go into those frequencies. And that's great. Similarly, when someone has like schizophrenia, for example, and they're hearing these voices of people that we may not be able to see, their brain is still responding and firing the same way as yours and mine do when we hear voices of each other. And so like there's a physical process that happens. And so for me, when you look at something like yourself, even when you're receiving messages through mediumship, right? there's gonna be a physical response happening in your body. There's actually gonna be brain activity, physiological changes. Like there is gonna be a translation of that energy through your body out into the world. And what I believe is that you have activated some of that DNA that science is like, we have no idea what this does. And so if you think about everything that all humans on this planet are doing, we're doing it with basically like 3% of our DNA or whatever. And what's possible to us then, if we really start accessing the rest of it, even if you just went from 3 to like 4%, like what's possible? And so for you, you definitely in that ayahuasca experience experienced some form of DNA activation. A part of you was activated that was previously not active. And so in my life, it's become a huge focus is just immersing myself into experiences and activities that allow me the potential to activate even more of my DNA at a cellular level and give me quote unquote like these superpowers or whatever we want to call them. But even like the ability to bring in that poem, right? That poem is a frequency. I'm a radio station. I'm a radio that can tune into that frequency. Well, what about the other poems that I haven't yet written that may actually be frequencies that I'm not a match to yet? And so through the process of activating this DNA and widening my frequency bandwidth, all of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah, I see that now. Now it's boom, ready to come through me. This 3-month program that we're talking about, Ancient Future, that program, I had no concept of doing anything like that. And Asri and I both had the drop-in download about what this was within 3 minutes of each other separately. And so we both were like, I just had the craziest, yep. And it's the exact same idea. And so that's an example to me of what's possible when we activate the dormant DNA in our body.
Mind blown. I'm like, yep, okay, that's interesting. Wow. Is it a little bit like also how they say we only use a small portion of the brain and then we can tap in and activate more of the brain? It's like 10% of our brain or 8% of our brain we use. Similar?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of different things. I'm not an expert on that specifically because I've heard that we actually use the totality of our brain, but just never more than that small percentage at a time. So like the ability to increase how much of our brain we're using at any one time would increase our capacity. That's what I think I remember, but I'm not positive. But I would say, I don't know if this has happened to you or anyone you know, but like, the experience of like a skill or a talent or an ability just coming online all of a sudden. Like I played the handpan and I'd never even seen the instrument. And all of a sudden, I got sat down in front of one and could just play it. And I thought everyone could just play it like that. And then I've had people come over and try and play it and they can't. And so I'm realizing that was just like a talent that came alive. And similarly, Azria has started singing and her singing is unbelievable. And she never sang. Like we've been together 9 years and she didn't sing until like this year. And those are examples to me of really tangible things where like it's almost like an ability just came online like out of nowhere. And I know people who started like painting or started like making things with their hands that they never even thought of before, and they could just do it really well. And I consider that to be an aspect also of like what I'm talking about, DNA activation, where it just exists in us. It's in our DNA to be able to do this stuff. And it's just a matter of activating it so we can access it.
Yeah, nice. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for asking.
So is there anything else that you would like to share in this space before we wrap up, Adam?
Anything else? No, I think we've covered a lot of it. I would just invite people to continue their own journey of what they feel called to. I think one of the biggest game-changing ways that you can live your life is by honoring your intuition. And so if you have been thinking about doing that art class, or you've been thinking about taking surfing lessons, or you're listening to me speak and you're like, oh, I want to be a part of that ancient future program, like whatever it is, when you have those like gut intuitive responses that you're like, I can't shake it, I just know that I'm supposed to, trust those and live those, because what you're doing is you're allowing yourself to live and take action based on the part of you that can exist beyond time, the part of your consciousness that is not limited by what you have experienced in this. I'm about to be 33. Like my 33 years on this planet are so limited relative to the part of me that exists beyond the fourth dimension of time. And so that would be my biggest encouragement to people. And so that intuitive response, trust it as guidance from your higher self, and just start to take action based on it, and magical things can happen. And if you'd like to stay connected with me at all, please do so. I have a lot of what was called recently online real estate. So you can find me at adamroa.com, Instagram, adam.roa, Facebook's my primary, YouTube, the Deep Dive with Adam Roa. It's a podcast that's available everywhere. And then and we have this 3-month program that we're taking applications for. When this comes out in January, you said, right?
Yeah. Early January.
Do you know when in January? Because our program starts January 11th.
Yeah, so it's before the 11th. It's just before the 11th.
Just before. So basically, the people who are listening to this, if you want to be a part of the program, you got to honor that intuition immediately. And you can go to the slinkyeffect.com to apply for the course, because it's application only, because we're limiting it, because there's only so many intentions we can take into the ceremony space.
Fantastic. I was going to ask you, where can everyone find you, but you have done that beautifully well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us in this space, Adam. It's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, my pleasure too. I really enjoyed it. I geek out on this stuff.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, I had a lot of fun too. So thank you to each and every single one of you. Thank you to each and every single one of you who has tuned in also for this episode. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so on the iTunes link or on the YouTube link also. Look forward to seeing you next week. Till then, bye.